The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 19. In-Laws and Straws. Still mid-April, 1996.
If he can see inside of my head, why am I unable to see inside his?
Voldemort was sitting up in bed, Nagini curled against him. Wormtail had just woken him to share this most unpleasant and unexpected news.
"I do not know, my lord. I'm uncertain how it happened, exactly,"
answered Wormtail nervously. Voldemort appeared lost in thought for a moment.
"You've done well, Wormtail, and you say you think that he's close with your old friend, Sirius Black."
"Yes, my lord."
"I see."
Wormtail had told him about the rumours of how Sirius Black had turned to the dark side and killed his old friend Peter in the street, before being carted away to Azkaban. It was how Pettigrew had managed to avoid punishment after the Potters' deaths. Sirius Black had not been his disciple. Sirius's cousin Bellatrix was, of course, one of his closest and best deputies, and his brother Regulus had been an excellent Death Eater despite his young age. A bit of a shame about Regulus. None of the other Death Eaters could explain what had happened to him, though Voldemort supposed he was dead. Otherwise, Regulus would have been one of the first to answer his summons. Voldemort had to assume that he was captured and killed by some Order or Ministry types, who had kept the news under wraps, perhaps hoping to lure more of Voldemort's Death Eaters into the same trap. He knew that Sirius had escaped from Azkaban, but he assumed, like many, that the wizard had gone underground, left England entirely. Now, it sounded as though the Potter boy knew him quite well, and had spent time with him. How very interesting.
"Well, let us get everyone together to discuss our strategy tomorrow evening. I think the time will come when our little friend will have something to see inside his head."
And that is how a trap for Harry Potter was set, when the young wizard had no idea to expect a trap. It was to be a simple snare, but one that he would walk directly into, and he would bring his friends. The next afternoon, still mid-April, 1996. Richard's Lucius mobile rang. He groaned. It was the absolute worst timing. Linda's parents were on their way to visit from Cornwall, and if there was one thing that Heathcliff and Octavia Cavendish did not care for, it was changing plans at the last minute. In all actuality, Richard grumbled to himself, there were many things that Heathcliff and Octavia Cavendish did not care for. Anyone forgetting for a moment that they were very distantly related to the Queen, lifting one's saucer with one's teacup whilst drinking tea, their daughter's husband, Richard Granger, all things heartily disliked and barely tolerated by Heathcliff and Octavia Cavendish. But these grumblings about his in-laws were done privately by Richard, to himself, in the privacy of the water-closet, because Linda felt that sunshine streamed out of every orifice of both of her parents. There was nothing for it. If there was to be a meeting tonight, he could not go. He would just need to get the crib notes from Lucius later. He answered the mobile. "Lucius?" There was silence on the other end. He tried again. "Lucius, are you there?" A distant, tinny warbling. Richard held the device away from his ear to check the connection. They were still on the line together. He tried again. "Lucius, place the device near your ear." Richard could barely make out the yelled word, "What?" "By your ear! Put it up to your ear!" There was a shuffling sound, followed by the unmistakable swish of fabric. The garbled, disconnected voice sounded even more muffled.
By your ear! Put it next to your face!"
There were more fumbling sounds, and the voice sounded slightly clear.
"What?" "Put the device next to your face! Put it up to your ear! The thing you use to listen!"
Finally, mercifully, Lucius's voice came in clearly.
"My apologies, Granger. I misheard you when you said ear." "Yes, I could tell," Richard said miserably. "The Dark Lord has summoned us. We must go." "I can't tonight. Please, send my regrets. Call me as soon as you can to let me know exactly what was discussed, all right?"
Lucius seemed hesitant.
"Are you certain, Granger? Surely whatever you have planned does not supersede—" "Are Narcissa's parents still alive, Lucius?"
There was a moment's hesitation before the wizard answered, in an overly formal-sounding voice.
"Yes. Druella and Cygnus reside in Belgium." "And when Druella and Cygnus stop by to visit, have you ever cancelled your plans with them at the last minute?"
"No, I could never,"
Lucius answered, seemingly aghast at the very thought.
"Precisely. Thankfully, they're like tax day, quite painful to endure, but they only show up once a year." Richard sighed. "And today is that day."
"Do you wish I can extract them, to use your phrase for it?" Lucius offered. "I don't mind."
No, thank you, Lucius. Not that I haven't had the... No.
He finished hurriedly. Linda's frantic voice could be heard shouting for him from the landing outside their bedroom. She got more riled up about her parents visiting than Richard did.
"I need to go," Richard said quickly. "I've got to go and clear out a closet so they have a place to hang upside down and sleep."
"I understand," Lucius said. "I feel certain that Druella and Cygnus sleep in coffins."
Richard nearly laughed, but caught himself, remembering who he was talking to.
"Lucius, was that a joke?"
"Yes."
Richard laughed.
"Right, then. Call me back after your meeting, no matter the time."
He hung up the mobile, just as Linda wrenched the door open, practically pulling it off the hinges.
"Who are you talking to?"
she asked, with a wild-eyed stare.
Lucius."
"Never mind. There's no time for explanations. I need you to trim the hedges and paint the letterbox. You know how my father can be."
Richard had vivid memories.
"Thanks." "But, dearest, the paint will still be wet when they get here."
"He won't touch the letterbox, Richard. Just paint it."
Richard shook his head in defeat and headed for the garage for paint. Part of him would rather have 2 tax days a year than have to endure the annual Cavendish visit. The Lucius mobile phone rang what seemed like only minutes after Richard had finally fallen asleep that night. He fumbled, bleary-eyed at his nightstand, finally grasping the tiny mobile device hidden in the tissue box.
"Yes?"
"We are going next Thursday evening at 6 o'clock to retrieve the prophecy. The Dark Lord was disappointed that you were not able to join us tonight. If I were you, I would make the greatest effort to join us Thursday."
"I'll be there. Meet me here Thursday at 5. Linda has yoga again."
The line went dead, and Richard placed the phone carefully back in the tissues box. He lay awake for a long time, thinking over what he knew. And unbeknownst to him, Linda lay awake for a long time as well, thinking over what she had heard. The following Thursday, Richard left work early at 4, claiming to have a headache. Back home, he changed quickly into black pants and a long-sleeved black shirt. He felt that, as a Death Eater, he needed to look the part. He had no idea what Death Eaters wore as part of their Death Eater gear. Vaguely, he had a mashed-up image of Darth Vader and the Klingons from Star Trek. but he figured he could not go wrong with black. Lucius knocked on the front door promptly at 5. Richard let him in, and with barely a word of nervous greeting, Lucius apparated them both to the Riddle House. Linda had already cleared her Thursday afternoon, and simply waited for her husband to announce that he needed to leave early. When it happened, she smiled and nodded, kissing him on the cheek. Inside, though, she was raging. The taxi was parked just down the block from the Granger home, and from its back seat Linda had a clear view of her front door. It was with surprise, then, that she witnessed not Narcissa coming up the front steps, but Lucius. Linda gasped. What was going on? For as long as she had known her husband, this seemed like the least likely scenario, that he was sneaking around with another man. After 15 minutes, and no reappearance of the two men, Linda's resolve gave out. She paid the taxi driver for his time, and hurried up her front steps, bursting in the door, expecting... well, she didn't know what to expect. What she found was nothing. No sign of either man. They had to have disappeared magically. Linda dressed for yoga slowly, lost in thought. What exactly was going on? The Riddle House, as it often was lit dimly. Candles were spaced intermittently about the room, with 2 candelabras placed to either side of the makeshift throne that the Dark Lord had created. Richard wondered briefly for the 100th time why wizards didn't use electricity.
"We are gathered to prepare for your mission this evening. I trust you all know the assignment."
There were silent nods all round. Richard, seated close by the man, decided it was best to stay silent until addressed.
"Yes, by tonight all secrets shall be revealed. We will know what Dumbledore has hidden all of these years. A drink, then, to our good fortune, and for our continued good luck."
Voldemort turned to Lucius.
"Lucius, will you make my drink?"
Lucius stood importantly and marched away, gesturing to his friend Tiberius not to assist him. Evidently, Richard thought, this was part of their pre-raid ritual.
"So, Cousin Richard, tell me, how is it that you were raised as a Muggle, when your parentage is that of a noble line such as the Gaunts?"
Richard, thankfully, had been briefed and prepared for a line of questioning such as this. "I was an infant when Morfydd was sent away to Azkaban. My Muggle mother knew that he was unusual, different. I believe he kept his magic hidden from her, however, and she wanted nothing to do with the rest of his family. She moved away as quickly as she could when he disappeared."
"And you found him later?"
Richard forced himself to look into the unsettling red eyes. "Yes. Several years ago I was approached by a man who claimed to know who my father was. He felt that it was a grave injustice that the uncle of the Dark Lord was languishing in prison. He thought I could help free him."
"Who was this man?"
"He was a follower of yours, Regulus Black." Richard held his breath, hoping the answer would be acceptable to Voldemort. The Order of the Phoenix had chosen this name as his supposed contact with the dark underbelly of the wizarding world. Sirius had said that his brother Regulus firmly believed in the Dark Lord's ideals, and no one had heard from him in a number of years. It was entirely plausible that before he had gone underground, Regulus had sought out Richard, the alleged Gaunt son. Voldemort nodded solemnly.
"Yes, Regulus was a good man. He strongly believed in blood uniting families. I am certain he had the best of intentions."
Richard shivered a bit. From the sinister tone of Voldemort, it was obvious that if Regulus was not already dead, he would be as soon as the Dark Lord found him. Lucius approached with a drink for Voldemort.
"Is it the kind that I like?"
The Dark Lord asked Lucius with the sudden change in mood of a petulant toddler, looking at the drink doubtfully.
"Yes, my lord."
"Prepared the way I like it?"
"Of course, my lord. It had been shaken, not stirred, but I told him he was doing it wrong, and I fixed it."
Lucius gave Voldemort a small smile and extended the glass, filled with a frothy orange-colored liquid. Voldemort still looked uncertain. He turned to Richard.
"As my esteemed guest, I would be honored if you were to try it first."
Richard stared. He recognized the test, not just of himself, but of Lucius's loyalties. His eyes flicked to Lucius, who gave him the slightest of nods. Wonderful, Richard thought. He was going to have to put his life and all of his trust in his tenuous friendship with Lucius Malfoy. He took a deep breath, then reached into the breast pocket of his black Oxford shirt. He withdrew a wrapped straw from McDonald's, left over from when he met Narcissa there. He was careful to act natural, to not appear as though he was looking over to see the reaction of Voldemort. It was a calculated risk. He had seen a similar straw sticking out of the pocket of the Dark Lord when they had visited before at Voldemort's re-emergence. He had noticed how protective of the straw that Voldemort had seemed to be that night. Clearly, it was of some sort of importance to the man, but Richard wasn't sure of what. Was it meant to be a symbol of domination over Muggles? Commentary on the evils of capitalism and consumerism? A tongue-in-cheek juxtaposition of the menace of magical might with the most mundane and mediocre of Muggle merchandising? Voldemort eyed Richard's straw carefully. He watched as Richard peeled the paper meticulously from it and withdrew the straw slowly, as though withdrawing an enchanted sword from a mythical stone.
"You know of the noble house of MacDonald, then?" he asked Richard sharply.
"Yes."
A slow grin spread across the wicked face of Voldemort. "Yes."
He withdrew the vaunted straw from his inner pocket, waving it carefully in the air, in measured shapes. Richard, his eyes never leaving Voldemort's, pushed his straw purposefully into the orange drink. He cleared his throat. "Let us toast to burger and better things in the future." Then, taking the drink from Lucius, he sipped purposefully from the straw. The room, which was already quiet, grew deathly silent. Everyone, it seemed, was holding their breath to see Voldemort's reaction. There was a gasp from Voldemort. Then, amazingly, the darkest of dark wizards spun his straw carefully in his long, pale fingers. Slowly, he pushed one end of the straw into the frothy orangeness. He leaned forward, eyes still on Richard's. Then he pursed his lips around the straw and sucked. The look of unadulterated joy on Voldemort's face was startling.
"Extraordinary! Absolutely extraordinary!"
The Dark Lord took the drink in hand and raised it as, around the room, others did the same.
"Did you say burger and better things?"
Lucius whispered, leaning towards Richard. "No, you mustard misheard me." Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great 78.